go. It looks to be working. Cool. Pop out the chat. Move that window over here to the other screen where it's closer to the camera. And change it to live chat. There we go. Okay, I think we've got everything figured out. There we go. Happy day. Hope you're doing well. Let's see here. Da Vinci. I will not be there when this goes up, but probably has to do with movies. There's so many sci-fi films and very little fantasy. I mean, that is a potential thing for sure. But then the question is why there's so many sci-fi films. Because I guess that question is, like, the way I asked it was within relation to gaming. But maybe it's just about the overall zeitgeist in general, you know? Also, a question to ask. Michael says 2 things. Much respect for using OG Underworld's goblin models for thumbnail picture. I just took that picture recently, so I thought I should use it. I took it to use it in Friday's video and then ended up not using it. So I was like, well. But yeah, so those are some guys that I painted for Warcry. Second, I guess it's subjective, but the wide appeal of 40K and grimdark sci-fi is bewildering to me. Sure. I, for one, do not understand what is so great about Trench Crusade myself. It is just not for me. That's the thing, is that everybody's kind of got their own things. You know what I mean? So I get that. Fantasy is too friendly. There isn't enough real gritty and violent fantasy in pop culture. I mean, I don't know. Game of Thrones seemed pretty violent and gritty. But I don't know. As soon as magic is added to the mix, it seems whimsical. Magic is a bit of a thing. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. People into sci-fi have more free cash because we have no friends to spend it on. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Let's see here. Morning from a sunny, warm Toronto. Hope everyone is well. I think fantasy is still very strong. Warhammer 40K just has the benefit of fantasy elements and time to market saturation. Probably that's also a big part of it. Although technically fantasy came first. Warhammer was around before Warhammer 40K. Or Warhammer Fantasy was around before Warhammer 40K for at least 4 or 5 years, maybe not quite as many at that. Fungazi, how you doing? Morning from lovely Washington, D.C. It is sunny, but not particularly warm here. It's 45 degrees Fahrenheit, supposed to get to 53 today, so it was warmer yesterday. Good morning, painting up some Battletech while looking at some unstarted fantasy miniatures. Well, interesting. Morning from a wet but sunny Jonesboro, Illinois. Yeah, we had rain the last couple of days, but none so far today, which is good. And I don't know if we're supposed to have any or not. It says it's currently cloudy, but there's not a cloud in the sky. So, again, the internet has lied to me. Morning from Yorktown, Virginia. Overcast, but shorts and t-shirt weather. Yesterday during the Patreon show, someone said that I thought it was in Pittsburgh, and they said it was 80. And I was like, goodness. Afternoon from sunny Glossop in Derbyshire. Derbyshire, I think that's how you pronounce that. Derbyshire. Painting up the Underworld starter set. Nice. If Bulldog, good morning from a rainy Yukon, Oklahoma. Hope you're doing well. Kent, England, double dip. How you doing? Good morning from Cleveland, says Joseph. I'm working on some Trench Crusade terrain today. There you go. See? Good morning from New York. Home from holiday. My paints missed me. Nice. Good to see you, Jim. Good morning from Oconomowoc. How you doing, Mike? You can tell I'm from Wisconsin because I can pronounce Oconomowoc. Dragonfire. Morning from Quebec. Roan, how you doing? Good to see you. Good morning from sunny Peterborough, Ontario. Happy Easter from Alexandria, Virginia, working on building some drop pods because the new ones with static doors will be a massive pain to store and transport. Yeah, I saw that too. They're like, hey, we redid the drop pods. And you're like, oh, that's okay, sure, I guess. And yeah, normal drop pods, if you've ever seen a Space Marine drop pod, it's like a thing, it's kind of this shaped. And then when you set it down on the table, then you flop the doors out. The idea is that it comes down with the doors closed, and then when it lands, the doors open up and Space Marines come out. Well, the new ones they're designing, the doors don't close. They're just always open. They're basically more like a terrain piece almost. And yeah, storing them is going to be a real bear. Like that's going to be like trying to keep, because like you can't put them into like, let's say if you're like a person who uses like foam trays, like Battle Foam for years has always had the shapes designed to stick a closed, podcast, or not podcast. That'd be the podcast from a drop pod while it's happening. That'd be dumb. Anyway, um, the drop pod, yeah, they've always been designed to be put into cases and stuff like that closed, so they take up more or less space. And now, it's just, yeah, it's kind of an odd concept, but I'm not playing the army the army game, so I don't have to worry about it, I guess. Howdy from France. How you doing, Jean? Happy 420 to those who celebrate. Nice. Good morning from Winnicott. How you doing? Good time of day from too hot Clearwater, Florida. I mean, I think Florida is very frequently kind of too hot for me. For people who like that kind of thing, then that's the kind of thing you would like. But it's too hot for me. Good morning or other time of day from Molly, whomst has her boyfriend visiting and can't stick around. Gotcha. Have a good time, Molly. Fonty, how you doing? Jimbo, good morning from Richmond, Virginia. Happy non-heathen Easter. I'm not familiar with what that means. Hello from Reading, or is it Reading? Reading. I think it's Reading. It's Reading or Reading, one of the two. UK. Spending a chill Sunday working on my Barons War retinue. Nice. Good morning from Gilbert, Arizona. How you doing? Good morning from sunny and chilly Eastern Connecticut. Good morning from Massachusetts. Sorting old miniatures today has me thinking about the sad news that Rapham Miniatures closed their doors. Wow, I hadn't heard that. They had some fun, not Space Marines and Cyber Orc miniatures I really love. Huh. Am I thinking of somebody else? To be fair, maybe I don't remember that Rapham was still open. I remember Rapham from back in the day, but I didn't realize that they had recently closed. I wonder if it's because there's been a bunch of closings and things like that based off of the tariff stuff, mostly in the board game space that I've seen so far. But there's been at least a couple of different companies, one that I've actually heard of that is either basically laying everyone off and seeing what happens, and the other one is I think just kind of just being like, well, we got to shut her down. So, and that will continue to occur. Let's see here. John Ashley Smith, how you doing? Didn't have my sound settings right, couldn't hear anything. Well, that'll happen. Good morning from the land of Sussex, where the weather is primed for priming. Nice. Good morning from Marlborough, Massachusetts. Is that right? Hello from Italy. I finally have some time to relax and listen to the show. Well, it's good to hear, Wargaming Lobby. I hope you're doing well. Good morning from Richmond. I just got into Battletech Alpha Strike, a solo co-op expansion Aces is releasing later this year. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, to be honest with you. I really am, the Aces expansion. Eric Lee, good morning from sunny Connecticut. Hope everyone's having a great day. Darren, just got into Kill Team, and man, I'm really hating Space Marines. Just in general? Or because what do you have access to for Space Marines in the new Kill Team? You've just only got the Scouts, don't you? No, there's also the Sneaky Space Marines. There's a Sneaky Space Marine squad too, isn't there? I think. I forget what they're called. Not Intercessors, not... I don't know. Anyway. Good morning from Southwest Virginia. Currently working on Marduk the Tyrant from Archon Studios. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well as well. Not enough violent fantasy and pop culture. Dark Souls would like a word? Sure, exactly. Yeah, that's gritty and dark. That's a good point. Very good. I've never played any of those games. I am not the type of player who plays those games because I don't want to play games for challenge. I want to play games for fun. I don't know. I just I guess from what I understand, was there a difficulty slider that they put into Elden Ring and that made everybody mad? Or did just Elden Ring seem slightly easier and that made a lot of people mad? Because I'll be honest to you, I would maybe play one of those games, but if I can't put it on normal or easy mode, then it's not going to happen. So, good morning from Washington, D.C., working on some 3D printed minis for Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadowdeep. Nice. Good morning from Buenos Aires. How you doing? Good morning, Uncle Adam and all. I have my coffee and bagel ready. Packing to move on Wednesday. Just to another part of town. Well, I mean, good luck. There's very few things in life that I hate more than moving. So I hope it turns out pretty. I hope it turns out pretty good for you. Game of Thrones is more of a historical than fantasy. I mean, there are dragons in it and magic, so I don't think that that's historical. I don't believe that Westeros is historically accurate. I'm pretty sure I think I'm right on How is fantasy the number one in RPGs but number two in sci-fi? Wait, what? I prefer fantasy from Warhammer. Or do you mean number two in miniatures? Um, I mean, I think that it's got something to do, obviously, with I don't know. That's a very good question because as we've already determined, fantasy started like Warhammer Fantasy came out before 40K, so it's been around longer. Um, but if you look at the numbers, if you look at the ICV2 stuff, like the ICV2 is this website that kind of surveys game stores, and asks them like what's been selling and all that kind of stuff. And every quarter they put out these numbers for board games and RPGs and all kinds of stuff, and also non-collectible miniature games, and also collectible miniature games, which at this point are basically hero clicks. But that was how they originally differentiated it. And like first place, I where was that? We just talked about it on the podcast, Vince and I. And it was a screenshot that got shared during. Here it is. So you can't see this. Looks like that. Top miniature lines, fall of 2024. So this is quarter four, or maybe quarter three. I don't know, one of the two, in 2024. So last year. So rank number one was Warhammer 40K. Rank number two was Battletech. So that's two science fiction ones taking the first and second slot. Rank number three was Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures from WizKids, which are basically those like, they're predominantly all fantasy, so that's at least a fantasy thing, but they're the unpainted but primed like miniatures that you can buy at the store and then just paint them up and stuff like that. And then number four was Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So Warhammer Age of Sigmar is in this particular thing from ICV2, who are a trusted, information site for this type of thing. Basically, those little $4 or $5 plastic miniatures that are primed but unpainted that you can buy from the store are selling more than Age of Sigmar, which is a thing. And the first two slots are both sci-fi. So, but in in role-playing games, fantasy is kind of king, isn't it? And I think that that's partially due to, again, market domination of a specific title. Like 40K got real big, and then the question is, did it get real big because sci-fi is more enjoyed by people than fantasy, or did it get real big just for other reasons, marketing, whatever? And then that caused more people to enjoy sci-fi versus fantasy. And on the role-playing side, D&D being so big, there's more fantasy people doing that. You know what I mean? It's a good question. I know personally, I generally prefer sci-fi stuff in general, movies, comics, books, whatever, games. But it's not absolute. It's not like, well, I won't touch anything fantasy. I just have a tendency to prefer stuff that's fantasy, that's sci-fi. If it's possible for science to be so advanced as to be indistinguishable from magic, then magic can feel unbounded by rules. Interesting. Working on putting together an expedition team for alien zoology. Ooh. Fangazi says, my problem with fantasy is that it somehow seemed nerdier than science fiction when I was a kid. Well, I guess it's because I think science fiction is a thing that could happen to some degree, whereas fantasy, I mean, I guess it's possible that fantasy could happen someday. Like all of a sudden, like there's an apocalypse and everything gets torn down and then we're living in castles and there's dragons and stuff. It's a possibility, I guess, but it's more likely that you're going to have spaceships. But yeah, I can see that. Anima Tactics was overall fantasy anime aesthetic, but added mechs later. Does adding technology like that make it sci-fi? I don't know. I remember Anima Tactics and I never understood it, but I'm not an anime person. So yeah. Derek, how you doing? Morning from overcast Newark, Delaware. Robert, how you doing? Chile, Norwich. Is it Norwich? I think it's just Norwich, but I could be wrong. UK. Dan Black, hope you're doing well. Even though I haven't played, I'm happy for Old World. I missed the aesthetics. Just wish there was a skirmish in that style. Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I'm always looking for a skirmish game, so I get that completely. But I don't know. The only models that I see from Old World that I really are nostalgic for are the skeletons with the giant hands and the big weird heads. Um, Age of Sigmar skeletons now, the Death Rattle or whatever, are just way better. They're much better sculpts. They look more slightly realistic to some degree. Um, but I do have some nostalgia for those old goofy looking skeletons, those chunky ones. That being said, I also have a bunch of them, so I don't see myself buying any. But if there was some sort of like old world skirmish game where I could have like a cool bunch of those big honking skeletons, I might do that. Could see that happening. You know what I mean? But I'm not interested in playing Old World because it's an army game, and it's also rank and flank, which is just still, it's like 2 strikes against it for me. Off to Aaron's Nordic Center for brunch. Oh wow. Thanks for your games. Just learning Space Station Zero. Oh well, that's nice of you to say, Derek. I appreciate that. I am hopefully tonight or tomorrow morning sending off our next game to the printing company for them to start working on it. Nearly everything is done. There's tiny little bits and pieces and the cover, but other than that, everything else is done. It's been a long process. Morning from Overcast, Idaho. How you doing? Fantasy and tabletop is kind of generic, which is dominated by D&D. 40K, meanwhile, is a unique property. In comparison to Dungeons and Dragons, maybe, yes, I guess I could see that. Dungeons and Dragons really came from a place. The people that designed Dungeons and Dragons basically wanted to play Lord of the Rings with the Fellowship and not with the Battle of Five Armies. Like that was kind of where it was coming from. From what I've always heard is that they were playing Battle of Five Armies, the big battles and stuff like that, as a miniatures game. And then I think it was Gary and Dave were just like, but wouldn't it be cool if we were just like these guys instead of all this stuff? If we were just these guys and we were going on adventures. And that's kind of what was the spark that lit them to eventually design Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense that way too. Good morning from Bavaria. Building my new Soul Blight box. Nice. What up, Uncle? Beautiful day here in Augusta, Georgia, so I'm going to stay inside and paint. That's, I understand it. Working on my first ever mechs for an Alpha Strike Lance unit. Cool. Nice. I painted a bunch of Alpha Strike stuff all at once, and it was fun. It was 22 degrees Celsius, 72 degrees Fahrenheit here yesterday. Shorts would have been a good option. Sure, I can understand that. Happy Easter from Florida. I'm off to church, but I'll listen later. Did some Warcry painting last night. Nice. Excuse me. Big issue was that my mom hated anything remotely occult, so no games or shows with magic in our house. That's also, yeah, that can definitely do that too. I can understand that. Oh, I have scrolled too far. Infiltrators. Yep, that was the words I was looking for, I think. Let's see here. Had a discussion with a mate last week. We found that books, fantasy reigns, movies, and TV of late, it seems to be sci-fi by a scratch. Gaming is sci-fi. Yeah, it's interesting. It is. 40K maybe became popular because the bases are round. Fantasy battle were square. I mean, I do prefer round bases. I'm not going to lie. I don't know that I have a good reason why I do, but I do prefer round bases. But I don't know if that's it. Maybe. Painting some Blood Bowl Lizardmen this morning. Nice. From Jacksonville, Florida. Good morning from Newburgh, New York. Yesterday, the forecast for today was 80 degrees. Turns out my weather app lied and is currently a high 50. Well, again, the internet will lie to you. Good morning from Madison. How you doing, Richard? Fantasy as a concept largely predates sci-fi, especially if you consider fairy tales and religious myths going back millennia. It is bizarre to me. I actually prefer fantasy as well. I mean, sure, like there was definitely, when you start talking about fairy tales, I've never thought of a science fiction fairy tale. There was science fiction in literature here and there, but I believe many people believe that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was the first piece of science fiction. I swear I heard that someplace, but I could be wrong. Good morning from Melbourne, Florida. Motorweth Jazz, how you doing? Hello, hello. Love the channel and always enjoy watching. I'm spending the morning working on 1490 Doom and wondering if you're looking forward to the new classes they have coming out. I'm looking forward to a bunch of stuff. I'm looking forward to, with 1490 Doom, I want to make my own board. I have been struggling and going back and forth in the conceptual phase, trying to figure out whether I want to make it modular or not. After seeing their boards at Adepticon, I'm feeling now that I'm not going to make it modular. I'm going to make it a single way to go, and then that'll be the way to go. And then if someday I get just absolutely so bored with it and have become so good at just completely crushing people on that board, then I'll make a new one. But for right now, I think I can do without trying to figure out a modular way to make a round board happen, and all that kind of stuff. So, but I'm also looking forward to the new stuff that they're coming out with. Morning from a warm, sunny Tennessee. Not a big fan style player, but I like some of the sculpts. Just got enough bolt action stuff to refight the Normandy campaign. Nice. Warhammer is a rather unique setting, given that most fantasy settings rely on medieval stasis and fantasy gun control, but it still looks rather too similar anyway. I like fantasy and I love Conan style stuff. Is it Conan or Conan? Conan. Conan the Barbarian. Conan the O'Brien. It's a different thing altogether. But I definitely love sci-fi more. That said, I'm one of my jams is sci-fi in fantasy settings. Oh, interesting. Happy Easter and happy WrestleMania to those that celebrate. Sure. Good morning to Poughkeepsie. Good morning from Poughkeepsie. Building some swoop bikes for Star Wars Legion. Uncle Adam, have you tried the real color markers from AK? They have changed the game and getting through models. I haven't. Nope. Never seen them. Wait. Maybe Vince told me about them, but I haven't seen them in person. Let's see here. I think it's just that people like guns better than swords and all that. I mean, well, maybe. We had people when we first launched Rain in Hell, me and Vince, back in 2021, we had some people who were like, I really want to support you guys and stuff like that, but this game is all hand-to-hand combat, and I really prefer playing like a shooting force or a shooting army. And that's totally valid and whatever. And then we were like, well, just hang on. We're going to go with another game next year. And that game was, Space Station Zero. And there's definitely some shooting in there. So, yeah, that's a possibility. I could see that. If you had to enter the Earth's atmosphere in a drop pod, what song would you want on the sound system? It's a good question. I don't know. Maybe something from Daft Punk. I could see that. Age of Sigmar is the big game locally, at least in my play group. I don't think that there's an unplayed Age of Sigmar army in our Discord. Nice. Very, very, very cool. I like Warhammer's more Conan and Michael Moorcock feel. Plus, I sort of see 40K as fantasy with guns. I mean, when we're talking about science fiction and fantasy, I mean, technically both of them are fantasy in that they are fantastical. Really, in the grand scheme of things, if you want to get into the being a bit pedantic, you've got historical and fantasy, because historical is based off of stuff that sort of happened, World War II, Civil War, blah, blah, whatever. And then fantasy is stuff that didn't happen, right? So, but within fantasy, you have what we call fantasy, which is like medievally magic, swords and sorcery, yada, yada, yada. And then, science fiction, robots, laser guns, etc. So, but yeah, generally when we're talking about fantasy, we mean, again, sword and sorcery and junk like that. And when we talk about science fiction, again, the word fiction's in there, which is, again, fantastical. So, yeah, someone could have thought up some slightly better terms, but what are you going to do? Is there a reliable army painter paint chart to compare all the different brands? Not that I know of, no. I mean, like, whenever one of those kind of paint charts comes up and it says, oh, this is the thing that's closest from this company, that's closest to this company, that's closest to this company, it's predominantly always made by somebody outside of those companies. It's always made by somebody generally relatively independent. And that's a ton of work, you know what I mean? Like, for a person to do. So I don't know. Maybe There might be something on YouTube you might want to look for, but I don't know if there's like a graphic you can download and go, oh well, this is close to this, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, none of the paint companies have ever gone and like bought all the competitors' paints and then compared their paints to the competitors' paints or whatever. That's not a thing that I've seen. Home from a week in Texas, and the only video I saw of yours was on Friday. How did it do for you? Oh, Friday's video did well. It was a good, nice 2 out of 10, which is good. Sounds like 2 out of 10 would be bad, but actually 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, like low numbers are better in that situation as far as that's concerned. What those numbers are is when it tells you, when the YouTube app tells us as creators, oh, this is a 2 out of 10. What it is doing is it is looking at the last 9 videos you did and then including the video you're doing that's up right now, and then it is ranking it in views for how long the video's been up. So if the video's been up for 8 hours and it says it's a 2 out of 10, that means that the other 9 videos, when they were up for just the first 8 hours, were at different levels of views, and this one is currently in second place. So that's pretty good. So 10 out of 10, which normally you go, hey, 10 out of 10, love it, whatever. 10 out of 10 YouTube makes you sad because that means that it is in last place in comparison to the previous 9 videos that you made. So yeah, but 1 out of 10 is awesome. So yeah. So, but it was 2 out of 10, so not too bad. Good afternoon from northern Sweden. How you doing? 40K is kind of high fantasy with lots of guns. I mean, true. There's magic, psionics and stuff like that. Hello from Singapore, painting up new Soulblight Death Rattle box set. Nice. Reading UK is pronounced Reading, but given the USA has Schenectady, we cannot talk. I mean, sure, we got all kinds of weird stuff going on. That's true. Weather primed for weather primed for priming here in Winnipeg as well. I don't know why I have a hard time saying that. Automaton, how you doing? For me, sci-fi looks correct. The good future, like Star Trek, is aspirational, and the grimdark is cautionary. Well, yeah, I can totally understand that for sure. I think fantasy isn't as popular because Americans just love guns and robots more. Hi from New Jersey. I mean, maybe. I don't know. That's a good question. Like, there are a lot of games out there that can definitely get very focused on specific weapons and things like that. Like Necromunda is a big one for that, where it's a lot about like, well, this guy's got this kind of auto pistol and this guy's got this kind of, flame pistol and this guy's got, but I don't know. I'm seeing also other games now too that can be sci-fi, but are just like, this guy's got an energy pistol. Like, we don't have to get into the, nitty gritty of it. That was the thing that was always sort of big back when we used to play, speaking of role-playing games, Shadowrun, is there would be a lot of information about the different like weapons manufacturers and the different models that they had and stuff like that. And it was not as in depth as say like the real world, in which there are billions of different types of guns, it seems like. But it was still something that you could get like into the weeds on, everything like that. And I think you're starting to see more games like, Space Station Zero definitely is one, but also so is Space Weirdos. Like Space Weirdos is like, it's an energy gun, use what you want. And again, that's part of it being part of the miniature agnostic aspect of it. If you say, well, it's an energy gun, a plasma gun could be the energy gun, a bolt gun could be an energy gun. If you want to get real super specific, technically a bolt gun is a kinetic weapon, a ballistic weapon. But if you're just playing with miniatures that you like, it doesn't have to be. So yeah, could be part of that. I wonder if some of the fantasies issues that slightly splits its player base with historicals. Some people might want to play real knights and others want knights versus dragons. Maybe. Oh, and the blind box guys from Kill Team. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they're also Space Marines in Kill Team. Sci-fi and fantasy mashups like Starfinder, Spelljammer, Rifts, and even old Warhammer Fantasy always did it for me too. Corn Champions using las cannons on elves and Empire was just good, clean fun. I mean, using las cannons on elves is always a good time. I'm not going to lie. Hello from England, my good sir. Hope you're well. And hope you're well as well. Fantasy games seem just to generally have... it just sort of ended there. Boyfriend doesn't mind listening, so I can stick around after all. Well, that's good. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Good morning from very pollinated Florida. Oh, yeah. This eye was almost all week until about Friday or Thursday was just something was definitely pollinating and my eye was just, it sucked. It was no good. Like, they're definitely like Tuesday and Wednesday, I just basically had a Kleenex in my hand most of the time, and I was just dabbing because it was just gross. And I'd wake up in the morning and be all crusted shut. And it's no good. Also, not a fan of the Dark Souls challenge games. Yeah, I'm just not interested in playing a game that's crazy hard. I want to have a good time with the game. I think that games should be fun. And if your fun is doing the same boss 50 to 100 times, and that's, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I don't want to do that. I want to learn more about the story and stuff. I forget what game it was recently, but there was some game where at the end there, at the beginning, they were like, well, here's the difficulty levels. And one of them was just like, if you just want to like never be incredibly challenged and just like do stuff and do this and learn about the story and like have a good time, click on this version. And I was like, awesome. I haven't played it in a minute, but I was playing Diablo 4 on my Steam Deck, and that is, I'm just playing in normal. There is no like easy mode, but so far I haven't died yet, knock on wood. I did have to go up against the butcher at one point, and like so far everything I've just been like, yeah, whatever. But that guy was actually pretty tough, and I had to run away. So that's the first thing though. I've been like 30th level, and I finally got to that guy, and he's pretty tough. So that's, otherwise it's been mostly just enjoying running around and slapping monsters around, which is what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? I'm not looking to have a big challenge. There's a bunch of Space Marines and Kill Team, Phobos, Night Lords. Well, I mean, you got Chaos Space Marines. That's a good point, I suppose, yeah. Angles of Death. Most of them are there, and they're elite. Hello from the one true London, UK. There is a new London, Wisconsin, here in Wisconsin. Good morning from Cleveland. Good afternoon from London. Also not a fan of the Dark Souls challenge games. Did I read that one already? Maybe I did. Just had an update about Malifaux version 4, which seems to be reducing its token tracking overloading, so that's that. I mean, yeah, I can understand wanting to dial back on the number of tokens. Greetings from Argentina. How you doing? Good morning from sunny Hopedale, Massachusetts. Thinking of trying Spearhead. Have you tried the game mode? And if so, what warbands would you say are fun to play? I've only played Skaven and Giants or whatever, Sons of Bahamut. Those are the only two that I have that are painted. Those are the only two I've played. Well, that's not true. I did play Soulblight Gravelords, maybe? There was a demo that I did, and I think I played Soulblight Gravelords in that, like when it first came out. But I haven't really touched them since. I mean, it's a decent system if you're into that kind of thing. It's interesting how many people in the comments for my video about Warcry this week have been like, well, they're replacing Warcry with Spearhead, and I'm like, it's not the same. No, that's not the same game. That's like saying Combat Patrol is replacing Kill Team. Like, it doesn't, like, you got 40K and you got Age of Sigmar. Then you've got Combat Patrol and you got Spearhead. They are both games that are designed to get people playing to bigger games. They use the exact same rule set. Then you got Kill Team and then Warcry, which are both in the world of the, but they're not the same rules. They're completely different, and they're not really designed to bring people from Kill Team into 40K or vice versa, you know. And then you got Necromunda, which is the sci-fi, and then there's nothing over here for that. It would potentially be Mordheim. It used to be Mordheim, but we don't have a Mordheim right now, so whatever. And then you have Warhammer Underworlds, which doesn't have an equivalent on the sci-fi side, so that's kind of weird too. But there was an amazing amount of people who were like, well, yeah, Spearhead, that's what's replacing Warcry. And I'm like, no, Spearhead is a mode of play for Age of Sigmar. It is not... It uses the same rules. It's not a separate game for sure. And it's also not skirmish. And there's a bunch of other things too. But yeah, it is interesting. I think people want something new, and with how many settings of just orcs and elves and dwarves, they need to do something different to be in people's minds. I mean, technically, Warhammer 40K has orcs and elves and dwarves in it as well. But yeah, I know what you mean. You mean you don't remember the White Walkers' role in the War of the Roses? I mean, yeah. Priming the backlog. SIF, Free Folk Riders. I don't know what SIF is. That's an abbreviation I'm not familiar with. Kill Team Kroot and Battletech Armored Combat. Rattle, rattle. I've moved across 4 different countries in my life. Yeah, it's not fun, especially since those moves mean you have to get a whole new set of hardware and power tools. On the flip side, new power tools. I mean, well, watch AMG kill Star Wars Legion, but at least I'll still have my miniatures to play the Star Wars games with. I mean, they just announced at Adepticon a whole bunch of new Star Wars Legion stuff, so I don't think they're trying to get rid of it. If they are, they're doing it in a really dumb way, which is to say, invest a bunch more money in tooling and stuff like that. Like they had an entire, for Star Wars Legion, they had an entire, I didn't go to the presentation, but I saw pictures from it later on and stuff online. They had an entire like 2-year roadmap, I guess is the proper terminology, of like when things are going to come out and what's going to come out and that kind of stuff, all the way into 2026. Not necessarily all the way through 2026, but at least into 2026. So they seem like they want to try to do Legion, make it work, which I appreciate because, yeah, I was concerned they were going to be like, let's get rid of that. We need both the common factions and something unusual. Is Old World even in the top 5 miniature games? In that list, no, but oops. But that list was from the end of 2024, so I don't remember exactly when Old World came out. But the top 10 miniature games for fall of 2024 were Warhammer 40,000, Battletech, Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Heroescape, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Halo Flashpoint, which I was kind of surprised by, Bones, which is, the Reaper Bones miniatures, Song of Ice and Fire, which I'm very surprised by, and then War Machine. So, yeah, no Star Wars Legion, no Star Wars Shatterpoint. What else? No Malifaux, no, yeah, so, and no Old World. And no Middle Earth either. Is it destined to go away again? I hope not. Same with Middle Earth. They're my favorite GW game lines at the moment. From what I've heard, it's unlikely that Middle Earth's going to go away because of the license and all that kind of stuff. But Old World, I have no idea. I mean, that's their own license. It's their own property, so they can, whatever. But we shall see. What I love about the Star Wars franchise is that it combines sci-fi and fantasy pretty well. It does. I honestly believe it's because of guns. It sounds dumb, but it's true. People claim that it makes game feel very interactive, while fantasy has a much more meet in the middle and clash feeling. You're not wrong, because yeah, once you've gotten to the point of like, let's get into an actual hand-to-hand scrap, it can be, yeah, it can definitely change the play dynamic where you're just like, I'm going to sit back here, I'm going to come out and I'm going to snipe, or I'm going to catch this guy in a crossfire. And, like there's like things that you can do where all of a sudden, and again, I'm not super strategically minded. So if you want to tell me, well, if you were playing a completely hand-to-hand combat game or whatever, you can also do those same things. It's just differently done, or I'm sure you're right. But for me, it seems at least like in a miniatures game with shooting, there's times when I can take shots at somebody that they maybe didn't expect and things like that and whatever and all that kind of stuff. And they move into a spot because they want to get this, but now they're in the shot of my laser cannon or whatever, that kind of thing. And I feel like there's benefits to that. Whereas in games where it's mostly just about, hand-to-hand combat, sometimes it can feel like it just gets into that kind of middle thing. The benefit of a game like Reign in Hell, which I happen to have right here, strangely enough, this is all hand-to-hand combat stuff too, but there's special abilities and special things that give you different powers almost to some degree that make it less of just a slap fight sometimes, An old friend loved sci-fi and was neutral on fantasy. The reason he gave was that fantasy was looking forward, while fantasy felt, was it sci-fi was looking forward, I assume, while fantasy felt like looking back at history, and he preferred to look forward. I could see that too, for sure. That's kind of one of the reasons I'm not as much into historicals, honestly. I think sci-fi just gives more options. You can use guns, swords, mechs, spaceships, robots, lasers, teleportation, still use magic as seen in 40K. Fantasy is limited to what can be in a setting. I mean, if you're following a normal fantasy setting, yes, but there could be fantasy mechs that are I mean, an Ent could be a mech. You know what I mean? Like kind of a little bit. Um, Teleportation, lasers. Okay, there's not technically lasers in fantasy, but there could be an energy blast from your wizard's hand or staff or wand. Or I mean, there's a lot of that stuff can just be reskinned, which is why I don't know that it's necessarily as tactical or technical. I think it's more about vibes. You know what I mean? Off topic, video game fantasy. Am I the only person who didn't know Claire Obscure Expedition 33 was coming out in 4 days? You are not the only person who who didn't know that. I don't even know what that is. Um, Only knew about this game yesterday from the PSA Access interview with Jen and Ben. I don't know. I don't know what. I don't. I only understood about a third of the words in that sentence. Anmeister, sorry. Yeah. So you're not the only one. How much of this is the zeitgeist at the moment? I mean, that's a big portion of it, I think. Is tabletop game sprung up in the 50s for whatever reason? Could cowboy fantasy be the dominant? If it had sprung up in the 50s, would cowboy fantasy? Well, I mean, it kind of sprung up a little bit more. Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, with what's his name, H.G. Wells and Little Wars, that's sprung up in the 1800s, right? And so that, or the early 1900s, I forget exactly, but nonetheless, like that was all Napoleonics. That was the big deal, right? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it has to do with that necessarily or not. It's interesting that GW is still pushing the old world with new re-releases and releases while being mum on Warcry. I agree. I think the fact that they're not saying anything about Warcry, there are people who are like, well, they'll just release it, in the fall because they released the last one in the fall. Sort of, yeah, you're not wrong. And I did say at the end of the video, there's still a possibility that they could announce it at Nova, which is heading at they could announce it at Nova, which is the very beginning of the fall, and then still be like, oh, it's going to come out in November. I don't know, whatever, which is kind of heading more into winter, but whatever. Let's say it's October. They could still do that. But the fact that, like, the entirety of the thing is online only now. There are several people in the comments, and I don't know, I haven't checked their credentials, but there's several people in the comments who are like, oh, yeah, I either my friend who runs a local Warhammer store got that email, or I had a guy today who was like, oh, yeah, we got that message. And he's like, the strange thing was the message said, take stuff off the shelves because of the article, and then the article never came. And it's just like when they wrote it, it seemed as if the article was already going to be out at that point, and it wasn't, and it still hasn't been, and that was some time ago. So yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. I think just the fact that there hasn't been a peep about the entire property on Warhammer Community since September is, I think, telling. I feel fantasy invites more easily to storytelling. RPGs and stories with sci-fi is more visually interesting and open to new ideas, which lends itself to better miniatures and other visual media. I think sci-fi can have a ton of storytelling involved. Yeah, I don't know if that's it exactly. Not to me, maybe. I don't get why Age of Sigmar is not popular. It is far away from the vanilla fantasy races and factions. It's original, has lots of lore, great models, and interesting ways to play. I'm wondering if maybe it's just that third edition put people off. I mean, that thing that I've been reading you guys from that screenshot from the game manufacturers trade show presentation put on by ICV2, that happened, that presentation took place in February, and that screenshot is from the fall of 2024 stats. They basically, like I said, they send out all these kind of like forms to all the game stores out there, and then the stores fill in. So they're not basing it off of sales through distribution or information from the publishers themselves. They're basing it off of the actual game stores responding and saying, this is my best seller this month, or this is, blah, 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 whatever, that kind of thing. So it's not 100% one-to-one accurate, but it's a pretty telling accurate kind of, form that gets filled out and all that kind of stuff and everything, the survey. But yeah, I don't know. Age of Sigmar, So my point is the Age of Sigmar 4 came out in summer, so maybe sales hadn't picked up that far yet or something, so that could be part of it. It was still fourth place, but um, like I also said in the video on Friday, one of the things that was in the swag bag um, for Adepticon and also for Nova Evident last year was Skaventide. So, they were giving away a lot of Skaventide. Now, again, it wasn't complete. Like, I had people who were like, well, if the swag bag cost this much and if Skaventide cost this much, then technically you were paying more. And I'm like, Skaventide was not, and it's me sometimes forgetting that not everybody goes to Adepticon. But the swag bag is not one thing. The swag bag is usually like a bunch of different things, and Skaventide was one of the things in that swag bag. So if you paid, I don't know how much even a swag bag costs to add to your badge, let's say it's $175, then if you just got Skaventide, well, that wouldn't be necessarily an awesome deal. It'd be okay, I guess. But because you're getting that and also some stuff from Warlord and also some terrain from Warhammer or from Star Wars Legion, and like there's a bunch of stuff that the people who did the swag bags got, and that's yeah. So sci-fi just seems to lean into the rules to be more dynamic, whereas fantasy tends to be linear. It could be. It could be. Fantasy is great in small gang games like Mordheim. I mean, Mordheim's very cool, obviously. I much prefer fantasy, but I do enjoy sci-fi sometimes. I think everybody likes a little bit. I mean, I suppose there are some people who are like, I don't play anything but fantasy, or I don't play anything but sci-fi. And there are people out there who only play historicals, and people who only play, I don't know what the other one would be. You've got basically sci-fi, fantasy, and the historicals. And I don't know, cowboy games, steampunk. But honestly, the deal though, I think, is that it is about personal preference. Sure. Should 40K even be considered sci-fi? I mean, it has orcs and stuff. It feels more like fantasy and space setting to me. The trick is that most things that are considered sci-fi are technically just fantasy. If you look at Star Wars is basically a cowboy movie. You know what I mean? Like, it is, so much of Star Wars is just basically like some other kind of mythical tale or whatever, and then you just put robots and lasers in it, and it's not. Years and years ago, I saw a thing about how most sci-fi movies aren't science fiction at all. The only science fiction movie, and this was again years and years ago. So there's probably been some others since that this author would have. I think it was Ben Bova. Ben Bova wrote an article about how the only science fiction movie was 2001, because Star Wars, Star Trek, those are all just like, Star Trek is like, it's basically an exploration movie, and it could take place on a boat. You know what I mean? With like Magellan and stuff and whatever. It doesn't, and they're meeting different people and things are happening. And so science fiction, if you want to get down to brass tacks, is a very specific kind of thing, according to Ben Bova in this article. And it's about like, the change in how our brains change when technology gets involved and this and that and all kind of. He was very specific about it, being Ben Bova, who's a very well-known science fiction author. But a lot of science fiction movies are basically just fantasy reskinned with robots and lasers and stuff. So yeah, I understand that. Thundar the Barbarian. There you go. See, that's. Remember the old days where the hobby was just fantasy until Traveller? I mean, there was probably something before Traveller in RPGs, but maybe not. Despite being a few years after Star Wars, etc., most of it having the hobby be sci-fi and pop culture, sci-fi was too much. Huh? Is the love of sci-fi and its supposed grounding in reality one of the reasons why urban fantasies become more popular these days? As a literature, you mean? Potentially, because I don't know of a lot of urban fantasy, say, miniatures games. Probably some more RPGs. I could definitely see more RPGs that are urban fantasy. My wife is a voracious reader, so I'm familiar with the term urban fantasy from literature, from books and stuff. But from I haven't seen much in the way of that in miniatures. The only thing that I could think of as maybe being urban fantasy, possibly, there's a game called Wild in the Streets, um, a guy I know named Chris has a company called Slow Death Games, and Wild in the Streets. Basically, what happens is it's a miniature skirmish game. Um, all the different venues on this street all close at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. You know, the punk venue and the metal venue and all these different venues, they all close and everybody pours out of these buildings. And then there's basically a scrum and a fight between the crust punks and the black metal guys and like whatever. And so that's kind of, I guess, urban fantasy a little bit. I don't think anybody has any magical powers or anything like that. So, you know, maybe not. But I'm a simple monkey. I like creatures and monsters, and in that part, Age of Sigmar delivers so well. I think Age of Sigmar suffers from people still nostalgic for fantasy and always carries the stigma. Yeah, maybe. Mecha are basically fantasy anyway, so why not put them in fantasy? They could be magic powered or something. I mean, mecha, yep, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are like, yeah, that couldn't happen. Like you couldn't, like there's the way we know understand laws of physics right now, you couldn't make a thing that tall that could stand. You know what I mean? Like its legs would fall apart. It's something about it's the square of something or other. I forget exactly what it is. You know, like if you took like a person and then used a magic spell to make them super huge, they would fall apart because they're the stuff that makes up persons. Just because it gets bigger doesn't make it any stronger. You know what I mean? Bones and things like that or whatever. So there's a lot of people that say, yeah, mechs wouldn't even happen. But, you know, what are you going to do? Skeletons. Skeletons are the best. I am way behind. Lords of Light. Skeletons. There we go. All right. Let me see. For wargaming, sci-fi included more weapon and doodad options than can have an effect on the game. Sometimes it does, yeah. My son and I both prefer fantasy models in games, but we also play Dungeons and Dragons. That makes sense, yeah. I want to say because fantasy has less unique stuff about it. Everyone's seen all the elves and orcs and dwarves of fantasy already. And that's what's interesting is because then when you decide if you're going to make a fantasy game and you're going to do stuff that's not orcs and dwarves and elves and all that stuff, then people are like, yeah, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like if it's weird, there'll be some people that'll be like, oh, I like this because it doesn't have orcs in it. But for most people, they're like, yeah, but I know what an orc is. So I don't know what the heck this thing is that you've tried to describe, you know, this weird new alien race or whatever. But yeah, that makes it hard. Remembering the release of the original Rogue Trader, it was available in a local toy store. Warhammer Fantasy wasn't. The store sold minis for both. Interesting. I feel like it can just be a historic accident, like how in RPGs, fantasy is more popular than sci-fi. When you have a single dominating property, it warps everything else. I think that's a big portion of it, yeah. I think when there's a big thing that gets really popular, for whatever reason, then it does have a tendency to kind of drive the industry a little bit. The question is, why did it get popular over something else? And that's always a question. That it may not even have anything to do with, you know, fantasy versus sci-fi. It may have everything to do with because it was a different type of, like, it wasn't rank and flank. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when 40K came out, you didn't have to push guys around in like rectangles. You know what I mean? And people were like, well, that's kind of cool actually. So I don't know. It's a hard thing to nail down. Uncle Adam, I totally recommend you check Saline, the miniature game. Is so nice. Skirmish system allows you to use any miniature you have from other games. Saline. That's I've never heard of that. On the fantasy front, even though it's my favorite, I'm tired of the flat, lifeless art style of the games from Wizards of the Coast. Sure. I think that role-playing games have got a real renaissance going on in the indie space, for sure. I think that miniature games do as well, but I think role-playing games there's just more of them. You know what I mean? Played 40K yesterday with a friend, and we were doing a light version, much more fun than the guy next to us who got stomped playing proper. Yeah, I understand that. Tend to like fantasy more, but I'll try just about any game. Going to try out Mordheim soon and need to get the minis painted for Death Wizards. Nice. Many more sci-fi Hollywood movies than fantasy movies. But again, the question becomes, is it because there was like one big one that hit? Like Star Wars got big and then a bunch of stuff was like, oh, well, we should do that. Like if there had been a massive fantasy movie that in the 70s that had come out that had made incredible like just blow everybody away kind of profits, would that have then made a lot of fantasy movies? And then, you know what I mean? That's always the question. Um, Olden Demon's video about Infinity has convinced me I ought to be playing it for its depth and complexity and the way it tells the story, but my plate is already overloaded. I watched, I don't know if I watched the entirety of that video, but I did actually watch some of that video. Um, I feel like Infinity is really leaning into, because Infinity has sponsored several different videos from different content creators recently. Tabletop Time, the Australian folks. Um, the reason that he came, the reason he was able to come to Adepticon this year, even though they're in like kind of financial trouble that they've been talking about in on their videos. Um, this is stuff they've talked about. I'm not like telling behind the scenes stuff. They've made videos about how like things are shaky. Um, the reason he was able to go to Adepticon was because basically Infinity sponsored him to go. And that Olden Demon video, like he mentioned in there, this is a sponsored video. And I watched a good portion of it. I don't think I watched till the end, but I did watch a good portion of it. And he went through and was explaining like how the rules work. And it's been a while since I've played any Infinity. I've taken 2 or 3 demos of Infinity. The last was in, I think, version 3, though, and they're on version 5 now. It is still way too much for what I want. You know what I mean? Like, the models aesthetically also don't do it for me. They're well done. They're technically very well done. They're good medals now. Um, but they're just very almost kind of anime. And I've just never been into that. So it's just an aesthetic choice for me that I'm not into it. I'm glad that it's doing well and people are digging it. But like, it's really dense and um yeah, it's more than I'm looking for these days in a game. But I'm glad that they're doing well because they seem like they're nice folks. I had a conversation with Carlos, the president, again at Adepticon this year, and we got to talk. On the last day, we chatted for a while, and he's just a lovely gentleman. Um, but yeah, so I do hope they do well. It's just for me, the art style is the miniatures style is just not. It's too anime for me, and being an old guy, and the rules themselves seem incredible. Like the way he was explaining, well, then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and it was just like incredibly dense. And I was like, ugh. But for people who are looking for that, it's interesting when Warhammer Fantasy went away after the end times and then Age of Sigmar started up. A lot of people who were old Warhammer Fantasy people who didn't like Age of Sigmar when it came out, it was 4 pages long. They just, they're like, what? They did not like that. When that happened, a lot of people who I knew who were in Warhammer Fantasy moved to Infinity because it was a very different type of game as far as number of models because it's very skirmish driven, right? And the models are very different from fantasy models because they were super high sci-fi, kind of anime type stuff. So it was a big change there, and they kind of were like, well, let's go in a different direction. But it was still incredibly crunchy rules, which was the same thing that was going on with fantasy at the time. So I think that there was a lot of I know a lot of people who were like who went from Warhammer Fantasy, didn't really like Age of Sigmar at the time for first edition, and then went to Infinity. So I think that's interesting. Wish I could get into it, but Infinity models don't spark anything for me. It's fine if you like it, though. Yeah, same thing here. Sci-fi is more close to our modern day and thus more recognizable. It only takes most of us one step to imagine sci-fi from reality. Fantasy is more steps than relatable. Could be, could be. I think the reason that sci-fi gained the edge is because of the sci-fi movies series in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Star Wars, Star Trek, while fantasy got its popular movies later. Yeah, yeah. Gave sci-fi a head start. I could see that. I mean, there were certainly fantasy movies that happened in the 70s and stuff like that. They just weren't as popular. And in the 80s, I mean, look at Conan, like, Conan, not Conan O'Brien, Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer. But those movies just didn't hit like Star Wars did. This weekend is all Mordheim painting and prep for Nemo next month. Nice. How you doing, Elijah? Grew up in a religious home, still am, but never saw magic in games as real. My dad said it's like math or homework. Oh, there you go. Round, square, hex. Interesting. I get people often enjoy more the technology over the magic stuff, but it's way too futuristic. The technology ends working like magic. Sure. Um, as for other media, it's easier to train an actor to look good firing a gun, whereas using a sword requires more work. Guns also allow you to cut between takes easier than a sword fight. Sure, yeah, I mean, you got to learn more stuff when trying to figure out how to swing a sword properly versus how to shoot a gun properly. I get that. As far as the actor is concerned, not doing it for real, but for making it look decent on film or whatever. Yeah. Um, let's see. As an English professor, my student loans also claimed Frankenstein was the first sci-fi novel. Your student loans? Huh? Plus, it made my favorite genre, Universal Monsters. Gotcha. And then there's Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Rider series, which is sci-fi and fantasy drag. I read some of those when I was a kid. They were super popular in my school. Um, I think a strong argument is made that Star Wars is a fairy tale. Sure. Looking to finally unpack from Adepticon and start to organize my booty, which was too much. Well, Star Wars is space fantasy for sure, yeah. Your thoughts on Space Gits? My initial thought was it's just a bigger version of Goblin Argle Bargle. I have heard of Space Gits, but I don't know anything about it. It is, I know it's Mike Hutchinson, and I think it's in crowdfunding, and that is literally all I know about Space Gits. Round versus square bases. Maybe I'll put everyone off and use triangle bases. Ooh, there you go. Good morning from Madrid. The reason to use triangle bases would only be if there was like a reason in the game, like if it was part of the rules, if there was a reason that you could use it. But like otherwise, yeah, I don't know that it's I don't know. Good morning from Madrid. I think fantasy dropped in popularity when 8th edition released, and all of a sudden you had to have and paint hundreds of minis to play one game. I mean, some people like that though. Not me, but some people do like that big army kind of style. Age of Sigmar doesn't feel as it has unique factions, but Sonic OCs of other ones. When I first wanted to play D&D, my mom said no, we were Catholic, and she was scared I'd take it too seriously, but she still went into debt buying all of it from the Sears catalog. Oh, wow. I remember I used to see it at Walden Books down in the mall. Yeah. And then I found, when I was a kid, I went to the library. I went to the kids section of the library. It was like a different floor. And way back on a table, I found I think it was either second edition, maybe D&D, like a player's handbook, like hardcover. And it wasn't a library book because it didn't have the stickers in it and all that kind of stuff. So I took it up to the front desk and I was like, I found this back on the table. And they're like, well, it's not one of ours. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because there's no stickers and stuff. And then, so she kept it at the desk, and then she's like, well, I don't know, if someone doesn't come back like in an hour or whatever, you can have it, which I thought is probably, now as an adult, I'm like, well, I probably should have just thrown it in the lost and found, but instead she gave it to me after, whatever, I was doing other stuff, reading other books or whatever, and then she gave it to me. And so then that's how I got my first D&D book, was just because someone left it at the library evidently. So person was probably bummed, I'm sure, but both Conan O'Brien and Conan the Barbarian are the same, pronounced the same way as it is Irish. See, I always, because it was always Conan the Barbarian, and then when Conan O'Brien came out, I would always call him Conan O'Brien, and he would always have to make a thing about it, not to me specifically, but people would call him Conan O'Brien, and he's like, no, it's Conan. But I always thought it was Conan the Barbarian, not Conan the Barbarian. I don't know. I could be wrong. Still hoping for a Snarl add-on for Rain in Hell so I can use Malev's Cyber Demons in that game. I mean, there's already been 2 Rain in Hell add-ons in Snarl, one in 2024 and one in 2023. So, but there's no Cyber Demons in either of those necessarily, but yeah. Hi from a sunny North Wales, painting a scratch-built cargo hauler from Stargrave. Nice. Drop Pod song, Blur Song 2. Oh, yeah, no, I could see that. That's not too bad either. Thunderstruck by AC/DC, sure. Heavy Metal by Hammy Sagar. That's what I said, but it's not what you wrote. Sammy Hagar, like in the movie Heavy Metal, sure. Star Wars is a fantasy and sci-fi drag. The only correct answer is It's Raining Men. Honestly, that's a pretty good one. We share our mother's health by the knife. I don't know. Fortunate Son by CCR is the only appropriate song to blast before airdropping in the battle. I've got too much of a that's too much of a what was the Battlefield Vietnam, the old, after they made Battlefield 1942, they eventually made Battlefield Vietnam, and in that you could play music from your vehicles. There was like a list of, like, they'd licensed out, I don't know, 8 or 10 songs or whatever you could play, so you could do Ride of the Valkyries from your Huey as you were flying in and all that kind of stuff, and then someone would be bunny hopping and shooting a rocket launcher at you. But nonetheless, it was pretty cool. Rapid Fire by Judas Priest. What is interesting is RPG settings is dominated by fantasy settings, while miniature games lean more towards sci-fi. Yeah, it is interesting, and I do wonder. Like we were talking about before, I'm wondering if it's because D&D became such a juggernaut within the role-playing space, and 40K, for whatever reason, became such a juggernaut within miniatures, and that's just what's kind of steered both of those kind of areas. It's hard to get new players to Age of Sigmar since my local group, there's just angry people who still want fantasy and people who only want to play 40K with Metalist. Well, I mean, that happens. 40K is science fantasy more than science fiction. It has psychics, demons, and giant magic emperors. It has severe new wave sci-fi roots. Yeah. Slain is the Conan O'Brien skirmish game. I'm vaguely familiar with Slain. I much prefer fantasy myself, but I realize that I'm in the minority. Lots of people prefer modern or future stuff, I suppose. Modern gets lumped into historical, which is weird, but it's true. But there's not as many. I think that sci-fi is probably considerably more popular than modern stuff is. Modern games would be things like, Afghanistan, Iraq, stuff like that generally. Ride of the Valkyries, Immigrant Song, that's not too bad, yeah. Hoping Army Painter puts out a chart that shows which paints in the factions line are rebadged versions of the same paint. Yeah, that would be smart, because that's at least within their own wheelhouse. I know that, like in the new historical sets, there are some colors that are just normal colors, like black and white and stuff like that, and those are in other sets as well. And then there's other ones that are different, that are specific to those historical sets. My son Leonardo loves fantasy, so I bought some dead stock for Rune Wars to use mini agnostic games like Alien Worlds. He's just starting right now. Nice. That's very cool. Many kudos for the Snarlcast. Oh, well, good. Glad to hear it. There'll be a new episode out tomorrow morning. So, yeah. Let's see here. Maybe calling it second out of 10 would be less confusing for the videos. Well, I mean, that's what they kind of like in the Studio app, which is the app that YouTube creators use to like look at their stats and answer their comments and all that kind of stuff. It just says 2/10. So it's 2/10, 2 out of 10. And you kind of think of it that way, but it is second place out of 10. Yeah, it's I guess it's implied. But when I tell somebody, oh, my newest video was 10 out of 10, they're like, awesome, 10 out of 10. You're like, no, that's not awesome. That's actually quite bad. Yeah. If you want a different fantasy setting, read Raymond E. Feist's Daughter of the Empire. It has an Asian feel to the culture. Interesting. I really liked John Scalzi had a series of books that were about an empire, like a big empire that was failing, and that was pretty good. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there were 3 of them at least. It was pretty cool. There's a medieval romance that has Alexander the Great soaring into the sky in a machine with great wings and could also plummet to the depths of the ocean. Interesting. I feel like the RPG fantasy popularity is due to the more personalized escapism and playing a single character despite the magic and such. It's somehow more reliable and thus easier to be immersed in. Hmm. I mean, yeah, could be. Sci-fi generally has more variety. Utopian, like Star Trek, dystopian, like 40K, cyberpunk, hard sci-fi, The Expanse. That's true. Space fantasy, Star Wars. Fantasy is all more similar. Yeah, I mean, fantasy as a term does have a tendency to be like, we're talking about elves and dwarves here, people. You know what I mean? Like that's swords and sorcery, elves and dwarves. But I think there's a lot more to it. I think that maybe people are just, I think that, I mean, you see it in the indie space within RPGs, from what I understand, but in the non indie space of RPGs, it's pretty much about swords and sorcery and dragons and elves and crap. And that's what people like. So I miss playing Shadowrun so much, such an amazing setting. Yeah, we played, this was in the 90s. This was in the mid 90s, it was back when we used to play. We would play on Sunday nights. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was I haven't played much in the way of RPGs since. Played a little bit of D&D 5th edition back when I was still working at Milk Can. We did that at lunch sometimes, but that was about it. Um, Shadowrun was an underrated game. I mean, it's still available. You can still play it. Catalyst still makes it. I don't think a general theory of sci-fi is more popular than fantasy because of X, because it's not. It's not true. In TCGs, RPG, and books, fantasy wins. Movies, it varies by decade. I'm talking mainly more in miniature games. It was kind of the because of the channels about miniature games, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. Um, I'd love to see more fantasy that uses steampunk or 18th century tech like Bioshock. Sure. I mean, War Machine originally was kind of like that, but it has changed them. They've gone a little bit more sci-fi with War Machine. Fantasy is much more associated with nerds, which makes Johnny the Call of Duty player for 20 years less likely to be interested. Unpopular opinion, fantasy Warhammer would be easier for Amazon and Cavill to make and sell. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to quickly go through what I think that and they haven't called. I keep mentioning to Amazon and Henry Cavill when we're talking about other things, of course, because we talk on the weekly. But I'm always like, you know what you should do, but they never listen. But what they should do, I think, and I've said this before, that 40K show, it should be Eisenhorn. It has to be Eisenhorn. If they decide to make it some sort of Horus Heresy, big battle shenanigans, or a bunch of space marines slapping into a bunch of orcs, it will fail. No one will care. People who play the games will be like, oh, that's pretty cool. But your average television viewer won't want to watch that. But Eisenhorn is a cop drama, basically. At the end of the day, it's about a guy who is a law person. He has law people around him, a law enforcer, law enforcers, and they're going after some sort of criminal, whether it's what's his name, Cherubel or Slight or any of those different like weird demony things. And my mom will watch a crime drama, even if it's 40,000 years from now or whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And she would watch. But if it's going to be like just like a big giant war movie or something like that, A, way more expensive probably, and B, will have a smaller audience. It needs to be a cop drama. I think he needs to play Eisenhorn, but maybe he doesn't. He could just maybe be an executive producer, which I don't know what those guys do. I think they show up at one day and they have some coffee and donuts and talk to people for a while and then take off. But yeah, it definitely needs to be some sort of Inquisitor. It doesn't even have to be Eisenhorn, but it should be Eisenhorn. But it could just be some story about Inquisitors. You learn about the world of 40K, the universe of 40K through the watching this kind of thing. Like I strongly believe you shouldn't see a Space Marine until the last episode of the first season. That's I think the way it should go. Um, let's see here. What's your pick for playing Cyberpunk Skirmish? I feel like you talked about this recently. Sorry. Um, right now it's honestly Kill Sample Process, which is basically just a different version of Forbidden Psalm. or I mean, so there's Forbidden Psalm first, and then based off of the Forbidden Psalm engine, for lack of a better term, their rule set, there's been The Last War, which is like weird World War One. There's Kill Sample Process, which is cyberpunk. The newest one that just came out is called 28 Psalms, which is kind of 40K-ish, really, but also potentially fantasy. It's kind of a weird place because you can play it sci-fi or fantasy in the same rule set. It wasn't what I thought. Let's see here. I think the biggest problem fantasy has the lack of variety and general vibes. 95% of them are just rebagged Tolkien. I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. Someone's honking. Personally find fantasy models much more fun to paint, but prefer skirmish games that are dominated by sci-fi. A bigger sci-fi fan than just hating painting panels and cables. Panels and cables can be a bit of a pain sometimes, but if you use an airbrush, I find that then you just kind of go over that stuff and it works out pretty quickly. Remember the butcher from the original Diablo was scary? Yeah, and this is like Diablo 4. He's like honestly the first creature I've come across where I'm like not just taking him out. It was surprising. Token tracking was a huge issue with 3rd edition Malifaux, which was still an improvement over 2nd edition Malifaux, yeah. Is Army Painter Metallic Fairy Dust a white paint or is it closer to light gray? I feel like it's white metallic, but I don't know that for sure. I guess I haven't ever really used it extensively. I've messed with it a tiny little bit, but I haven't like used it extensively. It might be white with a touch of pink in it. Could be that. I mean, metallic still, but you know. Morning from Alabama. My take, fantasy settings tend to blend together. As a glance, Dark Souls, Lord of the Rings, and fantasy would look the same. 40K is more unique. There it has more publicity. I'll take some of those. I'll take Lord of the Rings and regular fantasy. I can see them being kind of the same. Dark Souls is pretty weird in comparison. I think Dark Souls is definitely grittier and stranger, and I think that's part of its attraction to some people is just that it looks so it is super grim dark fantasy is what I would say Dark Souls is. Is there a place to get Painter's Fleece in the US? I don't even know what Painter's Fleece is, so I don't know. Is online only the death knell for Warcry? There is a ton of models in that section now. All of the Warcry models are online only. If you go to the menu section where it shows Warcry, it says in the menu, Warcry online only. Like, not just on each individual thing in the Warcry section. The entire section is now just called Warcry online only, which I feel is not great. Wartime is only as dead as your community lets it be. I mean, that's the case with most games, really. Tabletop games. Hello from Mexico. Currently painting minis for Guards of Traitor's Toll. Have you checked that new game? I have not heard of it, no. There's no reason to let it die just because GW isn't selling it anymore. It's true. I was able to get the 1490 Doom Warrior Priest and paint it up a few hours. I've got that model. Not within arm's reach. I've got that model, though, but I haven't got a chance to paint him yet. I haven't, I mean, honestly, I haven't been able to paint Jack lately because I've been doing layout, so. I don't get why people don't like Age of Sigmar but 40K, but like 40K due to the races, but 40K is technically fantasy on space. I mean, yeah, 40K is fantasy and they just change because again, you've got elves, you've got orcs, you've got dwarves, you've got, you know what I mean? But yeah. Watch your latest video about Warcry. Are we really positive on the fact that GW is going to get rid of the system? We're not positive. It seems like it. And so the video was more about me saying, if they are going to, this is what they should do. Kind of is basically the case. And my big suggestion is that it should all the books should be put up for free on their website as PDFs so people can download them and keep buying. Because the thing is that, and a lot of people have said this, and I'm not smart enough to know if this is true or not, but a lot of people say that the bespoke Warcry warbands, those Chaos warbands and stuff that are bespoke, you buy them in a box, are just completely outmatched by using the compendium rules and using regular Age of Sigmar models. Regular Age of Sigmar warbands evidently stomp all the bespoke warbands. I, again, don't know. That being said, almost every single one of my warbands is either Age of Sigmar or these guys are from what do you call it? Warhammer Underworlds. Um, it's a mixture of Zarbag's Gits and whatever the Wolf Rider guys are called. I forget. But yeah, that was a fun group. I enjoyed painting them and I've enjoyed playing them. I played them against Sam and had a great game one time. Um, Shot a guy from the wolf through a window and hit the. It was anyway. So yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't. I think that they would be smart to keep those rules up there because then that would give another reason why people should buy more Age of Sigmar stuff. Like the bespoke lists will go away. The bespoke models, they'll be like, well, we're done. We don't make those anymore. Blah blah blah. Whatever. We throw the molds into the ocean. I don't know what they do over there, but I think that's what they do. And but the Age of Sigmar models would still have another use in that people could buy them and then go, well, I'm going to use them for Warcry and stuff like that. It's a negligible cost to put those PDFs up for free on the website. It would cost almost nothing. So I don't know. Just a heads up, to my knowledge, the Butcher in Diablo 4 is a random sort of mini boss, but once you die to him or run away, he should despawn. I did run away. Yeah, I did eventually get out of that building. He was in some spot, and it said that he stopped hunting you now or something like that. So I should have gone back in to see what that meant. But yeah, but he was mean. He was super mean. For Star Wars Legion, they did another rules update, which is divisive. Started rotating out old models. No more Emperor Palpatine, for example. I mean, I don't know that the Emperor should ever be in a game. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was also back in the day. We played the old Star Wars miniature game, not the one from West End games, not metal miniatures, but like the pre-paint plastic ones that Wizards of the Coast did. They did this game that was called Star Wars Miniatures, and you bought them and opened them up, and you didn't. It was like HeroClix. You didn't know it was in the box. It was blind buy, and we used to play that, and it was fun. But yeah, eventually Emperor Palpatine was one of the models you had, but he was like sitting on a throne. He was like on a good sized base, and he was like sitting on that throne from episode 4. That kind of trapezoidal type of thing. And I'm like, so every time that we move, does he have to go and pick that thing up and then put it over here again? I'm like, it's just sort of silly. But again, yeah, I don't think the Emperor should be a guy who's in the battle. It doesn't. That's not how Emperors work. Redoing the original models in hard plastic sprue. They're definitely all in on Legion. Yeah, I'm a little sad about that, to be frank, because it's gonna. I mean, I'm not gonna need to build much more. I've got the majority of an Empire army painted. I'm gonna have to add to it now because, of course, they've changed the rules, and now it's went from 800 points to 1,000 points, so I need more dudes. But like, I just really liked Stormtroopers. I could put. They were not great models and they were a little ugly, but man, I could put 7 of them together in half an hour. It was real easy. It was real easy. 7 was how many you got in a squad. But they were literally, it was like the head, the torso, and the legs were all one piece, and then the gun with the arms stopping at the shoulders were another piece. And you just put some glue in the shoulder things, and you went, and you just stuck him in there. Boom, done. Next guy. I can barely get an entire regular 40K model, like a regular dude, done in half an hour because I got to scrape all the mold lines. And admittedly, these guys had mold lines because they were, not great, nice hard plastic. But sprues and hard plastic and all that kind of stuff is, I don't know. It's fine, whatever. But they are definitely seeming to go. When you say we're going to be replacing everything with hard plastic, that's a lot of money. So they're not just messing around and going, well, maybe. They're definitely putting in some resources. Any guess on what GW is going to preview this week? I'm really hoping for a new Space Wolves box myself. I have no idea. That's a good question. Oh, hey, people are still playing War Machine? Well, so War Machine got bought by a company called Steamforge Games. And Steamforge Games is, they make a lot of stuff. So they make a lot of stuff for D&D, but they make a lot of different games and everything like that. So, yeah, in 2024, so it's funny because Steamforge Games didn't buy Privateer Press. They bought War Machine. So Privateer Press is still designing the stuff for War Machine, I believe. Like, they're like the writers and developers and designers, but then, so I think they're getting paid directly somehow. Like, they didn't buy, it was very interesting. In the press release, they weren't buying Privateer, they were buying Privateer's licenses and games and things like that. So Privateer's still around. They're still kind of designing and making this stuff, but then instead of them trying to produce it, where they just don't have the resources or the bandwidth to be able to actually produce the plastics and do all that kind of stuff, Steamforge Games makes plastics. Like, they know what they're doing. So there's a lot of that going on. Excuse me. What is this Star Wars you speak of? You should. It's a thing that was a movie from the 70s. You can look it up on Wikipedia, or Wikipedia. I'd wonder how many people are just printing for the old world. I know much of my group is. Like 3D printing stuff? I don't know. It's a good question. Funny how you never mention MSB. Oh, Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game. I was going to get into battle companies for a hot second. I bought some models and stuff like that. And then I realized that to play battle companies, at least at the time, you needed 3 hardcover books, and not thin ones, not like codices or something like that. You needed the main book. You needed the battle companies book, was another big honking thick book. And there was another book in between the two you needed as well. And I'm just like, because my wife is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. She reads through from the Silmarillion to like whatever the last book is, like every 2 years. And I think it would be fun for us to play. But when I was like looking at how many rule books you need to play a single stupid game, I was just kind of like, come on. So I don't know. What'll probably happen is that at some point I will finish up those models, and then we'll play Sword Weirdos or something like that with them, or maybe Song of Blades and Heroes or something like that. But yeah, from what I understand, MESBG is a good system, but it fails. It has the same problem that GW has with every one of their systems. Where they're like, yeah, but what if you had 7 books you had to run? You know what I mean? That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? And you're like, no, it wouldn't. Stop selling me books. Old World, excuse me, Old World and Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game aren't going away anytime soon in the near future. You don't drop a brand new edition or something the size of Cathay on something you are considering axing. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. No. There's the He-Man skirmish minigame. That's fantasy sci-fi. It is, because it is like castles and swords, but also like robots and like hover motorcycles. Yeah. It's an interesting concept. Have heard Lucas call Star Wars space fantasy? Oh, absolutely. War Machine, a game that held so much potential before hubris brought it down. I mean, hubris brings down lots of stuff. Not only is Old World doing well, it's doing so well that they designed an entire new faction of minis with amazing sculpts to drop. I mean, yeah, because Cathay, that's never been a thing before, right? So that's interesting. It wasn't like they were like, hey, let's just go dig around and try to find. We'll go down to that beach where we threw those molds in the ocean and see if we can find the skeletons that we threw in there 20 years ago and crank out more of those. Like, the Cathay stuff is all from scratch, right? I don't know a ton about it. 10mm Lord of the Rings off of the GW Warmaster series is becoming too tempting. Oh, that algorithm, that'll do it to you. Warcry is 6 years old. Yeah, it's because it came out in 2019. So it's technically, yeah, it came out in 2019. So it's really kind of, yeah, it's about 6 years old. Yep. Old World is not going away, as any specialist game making money isn't the main goal. They have 40K for that. I think if a game doesn't make money, they're going to get rid of it. Still, I do think so. Or at least just stop putting money into it. Maybe it'll be that. That's the situation. It's interesting that sci-fi dominates tabletop wargaming, but fantasy dominates role-playing. Yeah, we've had some people mention that. Duchy's Vinci from One Page Rules bring a perfect example of high-tech fantasy. Yeah, to some degree, I could see that. And can't be used as a mech because Johnny Call of Duty will find it weird and off-putting. Johnny knows what a robot or a gun is. Well, Johnny's not really not right, all the time. He's not necessarily got his thinking right. Shadowrun was a great example of sci-fi mixed with fantasy. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the idea there. Yeah. In comparison to, say, Cyberpunk, which like Cyberpunk meaning like Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk 2077, Cyberpunk Red, all that different stuff. Like, that's all, like, there's no magic in that. And I'm 98% sure that Cyberpunk, the role-playing game, came out before Shadowrun, and I think Shadowrun was a reaction to it. And they're like, yeah, Cyberpunk's cool, but what if we also put in dwarves and orcs and dragons and that and stuff like that? Which it was cool. I mean, it was I enjoyed that game. An end could represent a wooden construct and therefore a mech. I mean, really, what makes a mech? Does a person have to be in a mech? And that could be the case. Yeah, you could have something that was like ent shaped and it was just static and it wasn't a sentient being, but when like a wizard got into it, then they could use it, and then it was running around punching people and doing stuff and whatever and shooting bees at them or whatever. And then basically it's a wooden mech. I'm not saying that's our next game, but could be. Well, not the next game. That's the next game. Yeah, that ship is nearly sailed. Do you 3D print? I 3D print with a filament printer, so I have a lot of terrain and stuff like that. I have done a few like miniatures, but they're not 28 millimeter miniatures. They're like big robots. They're 28 millimeter scale, but they're kind of bigger robots. I've done some of those, but I haven't printed any 28 millimeter figures with my filament printer. It's mostly some robots and a lot of terrain. A lot of terrain. Is steampunk fantasy or sci-fi? Yes, that's a good question. Let's see here. I found part of the fun of getting into historicals is researching the era you're playing right now. I'm learning a whole bunch about medieval dyes and heraldry as I paint up my little guys. Well, that's kind of neat. It's kind of like part of the meta narrative of Watchmen, where in a world that has superheroes, the comic books are all about pirates. Well, that would make sense. Yeah. Like if there are real superheroes, you probably have fewer comic books about superheroes, I guess. Yeah. With Warcry, it's important to remember Kill Team also had a year of silence before the current edition came out. They could just be massively reformatting it like they did Kill Team. I mean, they didn't have a year of silence. They had like 3 or 4 months before second edition Kill Team came out, they came out with Pariah Nexus. I'm pretty sure. And everyone's like, huh, that's weird. And then all of a sudden there was a new edition, and then the Pariah Nexus stuff was all garbage. Um, but yeah. Frankly, not surprised Warcry went online only and went radio silent, while Kill Team's teams are small teams from 40k factions. Warcry teams are all random things like the Hashut or the Obelix guys. I think that they still make, don't they still make uh, uh, Age of Sigmar data cards or whatever, War Scrolls? Don't they make War Scrolls, though, for all of those things so that you can use them in Age of Sigmar? I think so. I really, really hope they aren't walking away from Warcry. GW has taken stuff off the shelves when a new edition is coming, Kill Team, but simply, as you said, we just don't know. I mean, that's basically the case. They're just not being forthcoming in any way, shape, or form, which is a thing that they do. I'm thinking that GW is generating FOMO with Warcry so that people will buy out the old stock before they announce a new edition. I mean, FOMO would align with GW. Gaspers, you're not wrong. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I played over 100 games of Age of Sigmar 4th and 10th, or 40k 10th edition. I can confidently say Age of Sigmar is a better designed game, and for me is more fun. Lots more flavor, too. Interesting. Cheers from Germany, putting some paint on Battletech vehicles. Turns out painting 60 plus models at the same time can kill motivation real quick. Yes, I think I've made videos about that. It is true. For most people, painting too many models at once, like in an assembly line thing, you gotta find your number. For me, I can do a good 10, maybe 15 if I have to. And then after that, I just lose motivation. So yeah. I've heard that staff at Warhammer World leaked that the Warcry will be discontinued. I haven't checked the sources, so I don't really know. I would be very sad, though. Yeah, I mean, I hope that they don't. But it doesn't look great. I stopped really caring much about the current edition of Age of Sigmar 40k because I'm not interested in the 3-year cycle. I understand that, sure. Fantasy is far more popular in RPGs, D&D, so it makes little sense. They did the same thing with Dominion. Lots of those were in swag bags. Yeah, Dominion also was one of those that they had pallets and pallets of it at Adepticon that went into the swag bags. Competitive players don't seem to like 4th edition. It just lacks the customization and has crap army building. For Age of Sigmar? Oops, dang it. I love it when it moves and then I can't see what's going on. Um, Star Wars is based off a samurai film. True. There we go. Okay. I wrote my first tabletop game as a fantasy game because I knew I was more into sci-fi but loved both. Gave me a good bit of training and experience before starting on my sci-fi skirmish game. That's smart. Yeah. Cowboy games like Wild West Exodus. I mean, Wild West Exodus went more into steampunk initially, and then now that War Cradle owns it, it's gone kind of weird sci-fi. Hard sci-fi stuff is just unfun to me. I get it, but I want a little razzle dazzle. Well, razzle dazzle is important. Ben Bova had a point. Star Trek was pitched as wagon train to the stars. Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, someone called Ben Over. No, Ben Bova, Bova, Ben Bova. Terrence there has got the proper spelling up there. It's a famous sci-fi writer. Hey, look, Nick just got back. Proper sci-fi seems a lot harder to write as opposed to fantasy with cool tech sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. There are only a few urban fantasy skirmish games, but there are like Osprey Blue Book line games such as When Nightmares Come and or Blacksite Studios' Will Goblin's Night Thirst. Yeah, I could see those both being in that situation or in that category for sure. Hard sci-fi is generally tough to write unless you have at least one fantastic element. I mean, like real hard sci-fi, it becomes like we're flying to the moon or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's not, you know, getting into like space battles and finding aliens is when you start to add in kind of some fantastic elements. So I agree. Bright movie with Will Smith. That's urban fantasy. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah. Regarding Warcry, it's also interesting that there are warbands that came out in recent expansion boxes that seemingly never became available individually, not even online only. I guess I haven't seen that to be the case, but I haven't looked close. But there have been. Well, they haven't had a new release for Warcry in any way, shape, or form in a while now. Was it Blood and or no, Briar and Bone was the last one? And I don't know if they've ever come out with those two separately or not. Those the models that were in there. I can't remember. Good morning from rainy Wellington, New Zealand. 3 a.m. here. Been painting hoplites. My goodness. It's late or early, depending who you want to. Aren't Osiark Bone Reapers basically skeleton mecha? Sorta. A little bit. Why no Shadowrun skirmish game? There technically was one. There was one. WizKids made one a long time ago, pre-painted, but they were like really big. They were like action figure size, and it didn't do well. Let's see here. Speaking of Thundar the Barbarian, are there any companies who make minis of them? I don't think so. Square cube law. I knew it was something to do with squares. Yes, square cube law. If something doubles in size, it grows 8 times in weight. Yes, yes. And so then that's why mechs are very, very, very difficult to figure out how to make. That's why that big Gundam that they have in Japan is like not freestanding. It's like in a big structure because it can't really stand there by itself. Does Adam even like Burrows and Badgers? Never heard him talk about it. I've never played it or anything. I don't really know anything about it. I just hear it's a skirmish game with little creatures, like little like, you know, well, badgers and probably rabbits and foxes and stuff. I don't know. That's all I know about it. I actually forget what I said. I was confusing it with the Underworld's releases that haven't been released separately. Underworld's just keeps releasing stuff. That's why I think it's interesting because, you know, there's a lot of Underworld stuff. I think cross fertilization of RPG and skirmish is becoming a thing. Yeah, maybe, maybe. Another nice agnostic game is Renegades. Very cool art style and packaging. You should check it out. I don't think I've heard of that at all. Peachy mentioned a company that made A-Team, V, and other 80s properties, but they make Thunder the Barbarian? Probably. Lord of the Rings crushed sales and didn't boom epic fantasy movies, but Marvel movies birthed some more superhero movies. It's hard to say what makes things boom. True, true. It is hard to say. If people knew, they would definitely use that to their advantage. Infinity made me somehow enjoy metal minis. From what I understand, the newest metal minis that they make are designed like, because I've built some Infinity models way back in the day, more than 10 years ago, and they were, but nowadays they like, it's all about, like this arm goes into this socket and it's like a weird trapezoid and it only goes in the one way. You can't be like, oh gosh, how does this glue? Maybe I have to pin it. You just like, no, this goes in here and that's just is the position that it goes in. So if you're like, oh, I want to repose my guys a little bit, good luck. But if you want them to go together the way they're supposed to and there be metal miniatures and still like, I mean, from what I understand, I don't know if they've like, I don't want to say they've perfected the process, but they've definitely figured a way where they have very little in the way of mold lines and other problems that you have sometimes with metal miniatures. So they're supposed to be very, very good metal miniatures. Let's see here. I heard Infinity described as an RPG miniatures game. RPG combat is usually not great though. I got 3 friends to buy Blackout, looking for a change at Adepticon. Blackout's awesome, and I'm as soon as I get done uploading this book stuff, I do want to. I've got 3 other Blackout forces. I've got 2 painted already, and I've got 3 other ones that aren't painted yet, and I want to get them rolling. Looking at the Infinity tables at Adepticon is more daunting than aspirational. MDF terrain is not cheap, but those tables are pretty. They are very pretty. I would have tried Age of Sigmar, but first GW destroys fantasy and then breaks up my old orc and goblin army, so I just stay with 40k. Sure. I think more people want faster, more streamlined miniature games. I agree. Infinity is too demanding for me, at least. I understand that. I'm playing Halo Flashpoint on this WrestleMania weekend. Oh, wow. My friend keeps trying to get me to play Infinity. I just can't get into it. I find that I'm drifting more and more towards historicals. Well, that happens too. I'm very much looking forward to Conflict 47, which is not exactly historical. It's alternate history, I guess. Funny Conan the Barbarian story. The creators of He-Man were originally working on Conan licensed toy line when they saw a rough cut and realized it was not for kids. Oh yeah, no, that's that's not. Let's see here. Greetings from Denmark. I think when fantasy died, many also went to historical gaming. I don't know that fantasy has died. Old world type fantasy is more appealing to me than Sigmar type fantasy. I mean, that's part of why I think they brought it back to some degrees, because there were people that liked it the old way versus the new way, and that's fine. Heading into work, just wanted to say thank you for never giving into the influencer mentality. Well, I appreciate that. There are times where these shows are the only hobby conversation I get to sit down for months at a time. Well, I mean, that's. I hope that I hope you enjoy it. I don't know. It's funny because I get emails 2-3 times a week from companies that are like, oh well, hey, we can we can sponsor your channel to do this and to do that and blah 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 and whatever. And it's always like, hey, like my favorite is that I get Stream Elements reaches out to me 2-3 times a week about some sort of like sponsorship thing, and it's has like when I'm streaming on Twitch, I'm generally sitting there and painting models and talking to people, answering questions, all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it be weird if you showed up all of a sudden one day and I was cooking? That would be weird. You'd be like, "What happened to Uncle Adam? Did he hit his head? What's going on? Why are you cooking? Why are you in the back? Why are you in the kitchen?" But yeah, like almost every week they're like, "Oh yeah, no, HelloFresh, definitely. They'll give you dozens of dollars to completely disrupt the way that you do business and hawk their crap." And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Um, we tried HelloFresh, my wife and I, years ago, and every time that they would send us produce, it would be rotten. And it's because, well, it wouldn't be necessarily rotten when you took it out of the box, but within a day it would be. And it's because those boxes would be cold, like quite cold in some situations, frozen, right? But then when you get um when you go to the grocery store, most of the stuff is not in a refrigerated section. The cucumbers and carrots and crap like that. Sometimes it is, but when it gets too cold and then warms up again, then so we just always had a problem with their stuff, and we stopped buying it. Conan O Barbarian. Ooh. Everything fits in a game if you believe in yourself. It's true. It's true. Where Eagles Dare, that wouldn't be too bad. Yeah, I could see that. That'd be a good drop pod song. I like that song. I meant a snarl add-on for ranged combat. Oh, I see what you're saying. Looking forward to buying singles of Army Paint or Historical Paint, as I already have the full range. Will be great for bolt action. Yeah, I think that when they get to that point, they start selling those, especially like the uniform sets, because they are technically a triad. There's like, I forget what they call them exactly, but there's 3 colors for a lot of those uniform sets. So selling those and being like, boom, there you go. But then there's a bunch of extra singles as well. But those sets, those 20 paint sets, are designed for people who are like, oh, you're getting into, let's say, bolt action and you're playing Americans. This box will do everything you need. But if you're already a person who has a whole bunch of paints and stuff like that, then there's redundancy to some degree in some of those colors for sure. I know you already have a million video ideas, but a video on 3D printing terrain or your personal favorite terrain makers would be cool. That's kind of a neat concept, yeah. I have been printing 3D terrain a lot, so not like real recently because I've been trying to paint stuff that I that I printed all summer. But yes. Prefer fantasy because of my D&D roots. That makes sense. I also got Age of Sigmar Soul Wars, which is an RPG back in the day. But I also got my kids Dark Imperium because they prefer sci-fi. Guess which one we have more of now. The Skullsy is the Interdependency trilogy with room for a revisit. That's what. Yep. Yeah. His last 3 novels were also bangers. I haven't read the most new one yet. I think I've got the Audible version of it, but I haven't read it or listened to it yet because I've been unable to paint much. Fantasy has tons of subgenres. Also true. I mean, everything's got subgenres, yeah. But you're right though, especially within the RPG space right now, for sure. Where we at? Okay, cool. I prefer War Machine to stay in the steampunk compared with how they are going now. That's always the case. Is that people like, some people are like, oh, this is cool, and other people are like, meh. Yeah. Eisenhorn is the best idea for a TV series? I think so. I really do. I wonder if the influence of Saturday morning cartoons has an influence on sci-fi's popularity, since they were not allowed to show modern guns or lethal weapons for the last 40 years. Maybe. But there was also the D&D cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon, which I was a huge fan of back in the day, and I had a ton of my parent. One Christmas I got a bunch of the toys, and it was cool. My opinion, the Amazon show should be a reskin of Star Trek with 40K. I mean, that would be then like a Rogue Trader type of thing. Maybe. 40K isn't a cop drama, it's Endless War. 40K is not a cop drama, but Eisenhorn is a cop drama because it's, you know. Eisenhorn could spin off Ravenor too. I don't know if they would ever do Ravenor because it's basically a guy in a box. You know what I mean? Like if your main character is just a guy in a, well, it's not a box, it's technically a chair, but you know what I mean? That'll be hard. Is sci-fi more relatable because you shoot guns instead of arrows or spears? You drive cars like machines instead of a horse? I mean, maybe. Eisenhorn followed by Caiaphas Kane would be great starters. Should be a new character, make it some type of apprentice so that they learn about the world as the audience does. I mean, that's a possibility too. Make it again a an inquisitor story, and maybe your main character is part of a retinue. That could be kind of something, you know. My friends and I created a game using our Airfix and Matchbox kits and figures. Played this on the basement floor. Well, that's pretty cool. If they make Eisenhorn series, they need Mark Strong for the lead. Honestly, I think that Cavill would work great as Eisenhorn. Like he's the right age for like the beginning. I just when I was listening to the initial Eisenhorn book not that long ago, I was listening to it, and he's like 42 standard years old. And at the time, I looked it up because I was like, I wonder how old Cavill is. And at the time, this was maybe a year or two ago, he was like 42 years old, and I'm like, come on, seriously. He can look real scowly. You know what I mean? I just think it would work out. Eisenhorn sounds like the first season of The Expanse, but that sci-fi detective that walked around wearing a fedora hat, and that sucked the most. I mean, that was weird. I'm not going to lie. My wife watched that stuff, and I was like, what's going on there with Thomas Jane or whatever with a fedora? But yeah, then, but as long as they don't have him wear a fedora, it should be pretty cool. I mean, Eisenhorn's an awesome book. Eisenhorn, that whole series is my favorite GW lore. Like, I don't, basically, Eisenhorn series, Ravnor series, everything else I'm kind of like, eh. Um, I'm from Asia, as far as I know. Wait. Oh, okay. I thought you were saying I think I'm from Asia, but that's not what you're saying. Hang on. All the big tabletops are widely accepted here, but for the FLGS, only 40K is making money, not because people prefer it more, but just because GW's feeds stores only. I mean, nearly all stores, friendly local game stores, not Games Workshop stores. Games Workshop stores, Warhammer stores, obviously they only sell Warhammer stuff, which I get. But when you're going to like an independent stockist, as they like to say, most of them just only carry Warhammer as well. And it's because they're like, well, that'll sell. Like I could carry, Malifaux and Infinity and a bunch of stuff. And some stores do, but a lot of stores are like, I only got so much time and so much space. So it's going to be the one that sells. And I get it. I understand. It's a bummer, but I get it. I think the problem is that's going to be a real overall long-term downfall for game stores. Is honestly the case. When there's only one thing you can buy there, and when people start to get tired of it, it'll be shifting to something else might take longer than you might find, and then you're also sitting here with a whole bunch of older stuff that no one wants anymore, and it's a whole thing. Very excited about Malifaux 4th edition. I'll be recording a pod ep tonight, reviewing the changes in depth. Well, that's cool. Age of Sigmar, I lost sense of place. The realms make it harder to pin down where I am and why I'm defending and fighting over it. Some progress recently. Oh, okay, sure. Good morning from Columbus, Ohio. Getting ready to paint some ghost bears. How is the new game coming along? Well, today or tomorrow is when it's getting sent off to the print on demand people. It's mostly all done. We've got some cover work that needs to be done, and some technical stuff. I got to make sure I go through, and when Vince is writing things, when Vince is writing things and he wants to reference another thing in the book, he'll go, like if he's talking about, and then, this is affected by cover, and then it will say like, see cover page XX. And it's always XX when he's writing it, because when he's writing it in a Google document, we don't know what pages are going to be what until it's actually in InDesign, all that kind of stuff. And the benefit of saying XX is that we can do a find and replace on XX throughout the entire document, and it'll go and find the first XX. And I'm like, okay, well, this is on page this. And then I can type in page 12 and then go to the next XX and go, well, this one's on page 76 or whatever, and go through all that kind of jazz. So that's still a thing that needs to get done, but it's basically perfunctory at best. So yeah. The bespoke bands are generally much weaker due to unit variety in the non-bespoke bands. They also have less fun rules. Yeah, the models were awesome, but I was like, like I loved the Corvus Cabal, the Iron Golems, the Dark Oath Ravagers. There was definitely some models that I was just like, I got to buy those models because they're awesome. But I found that when I wanted to make war bands for Warcry, I just wanted to do Night Haunts, those goblins and whatnot from the title card there. I also wanted to do, what else did I do? I did Stormcast. Um, I did some Putrid Blight Kings. I probably did 7 or 8 different Warcry war bands. I did the Skaven, the original Skaven, like they were just all plague monks or whatever they're called. It was like 13 of them or whatever. It was great. I just really enjoyed it. But yeah. Um, I really, really wish that GW would make 40K game using Warcry rules. Yeah, I mean, that was exactly what I talked about in the video. Is that Sam came up with the idea a while back. My good friend Sam Lenz. He's like, you know what I want? I want sci-cry. I want science fiction Warcry. I'm like, yep, I agree. I mean, we could make it happen, I guess. Maybe. Excuse me. Sorry for subject change. Will you be at San Savino? Monte San Savino? No. I'm not a display painter. Sam and Vince went to it last year, and usually Thomas from Army Painter and other people like that. A lot of people go. A lot of the big fancy high end folks go. I'm not a fancy high end display painter. I've done like one display piece, and it was fine. It just took longer than I wanted it to take. So, Diablo 4 running away, Monty Python style. If I was out of health potions or whatever, so yeah. Having Emperor Palpatine in a game is about as silly as having Primarchs in a game. Yep, you're not wrong. First edition Warcry box brought me into the miniatures, changed my life. Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing box. It's so amazing. But after these years, I decided to abandon GW thing totally. It hurt both my mental health and financial. Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand that. Back in the day, here in Spain, fantasy was way bigger than 40K. Today is not the case with Age of Sigmar. Interesting. I love War Machine. Even Steamforged Games is not doing great at War Machine, but I still believe Privateer Press is not at the good condition for the IP now. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really looked closely at it. I probably ought to. BJ Morph, how you doing? Steamforged Games are doing fantastic with War Machine. The digital STL thing gives you over $100 worth of models for free right now. First month's no cost. Well, that's cool. I mean, if you got a 3D printer, that's very cool. Steamforged Games starting STL thing is the best news for me in 2025. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to see bigger companies doing it more and more because they're like tariffs, shipping, like all this kind of stuff. If I could just sell you the files, why wouldn't I? I mean, sure, I'm not going to make as much money, but I'm also not going to have to warehouse stuff. I'm not going to have to pay for shipping. I'm not going to have tariffs be, a bugaboo. It's a whole thing. They've demoed kit-bashed Cathay armies and White Dwarf before, but never made dedicated models. Interesting. One-page rules looks fun. I have all of Vinci and a few people at my club playing it. What are your experiences with OPR? I like it a lot because of how simple it is. It's not simplistic, but it's simpler. I don't know. It just, there's never any time where I'm looking at it and going, what the heck is going on here? Things seem clearer. If you want to get into, if you're like, oh, this game's too simple for me, I need something that really makes my brain hurt. Okay, cool. You can add on all of the extra modular advanced rules and stuff like that. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. But it's just got kind of a decently elegant system. And I also love the fact that when you use the online army builder, all the weird special rules are put on the page in the army builder. So you don't have to constantly go back to the book and go, what does this mean again? Like, I still can't remember what like sustained fire means in comparison to like, there's all these new things that happen in 10th. Oh, sustained fire and this and that and all that kind of jazz. And you're like, which one's sustained fire? Is that the one where I get an extra wound, or is it the one where I get an extra hit or whatever, that kind of stuff. And they just put that stuff right there on the card or the sheet when you print it out. And GW doesn't do that because they want you to own the books and go back and look at the book. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Anything new being done for Adeptus Titanicus? I have no idea. No, I didn't. I played a demo of Adeptus Titanicus once. I almost considered getting into Legion Imperialis when it first came out because I watched a bunch of battle reports and I thought the rules were more interesting than most GW rules. It looked like they were taking some steps in the right direction. I'm like, interesting. And then I went online to look and see if I could order it, and it was sold out. And I was like, okay, well I forgot, right? So I mean, I could get it now, but that ship has sailed. GW makes money from 40K and Age of Sigmar. The rest is mostly subsidized with the money coming in from there. So take up the info space and diversify portfolio. Yeah. I've heard William Gibson hates Shadowrun. Wow. Has he ever played it? Oh, dang it. Just you move it, and then it goes, hey, you mean the end? And I'm like, no, I'm way behind. There we go. Okay. VJ Moore, loosely agree. William Gibson hates Shadowrun. There we go. A lot of conversation back and forth, which is cool. Fantasy has less DACA. Generally true. You're not wrong. So fantasy, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, and one-page rules fantasy plays better with that plays better than the sci-fi version. Sad. Interesting. The issue with Warcry is that people who play Warcry mostly buy Age of Sigmar models, and Warcry models are mostly bought for Age of Sigmar. So you're saying the people who are playing Warcry are playing it with Age of Sigmar models, and people who are playing Age of Sigmar are buying the Warcry models. That is interesting. I mean, you would think it would come out in the wash, but maybe not. No way 15 for me. I think it can handle working on 5 models max. Yeah, I used to be like that, but I've expanded. 10 is better. I can do 15, but 10 is better. 10 is closer to what I'm happy with. But like every once in a while, you're like, yeah, but there's 13 of these plague monks, and I gotta, or something like that. But yeah. I got Casey and Brent's stamping kit, and let me tell you, it is a skill you need to persevere at. Make sure you have plenty of cleanup material, patience, and be ready to walk away and come back later. Interesting. We knew a new Switch was coming for months. GW can do similar. I think they would sell more models and books that way. I mean, amazingly, they are better than they used to be. They literally, when I first started getting into 40K and stuff like that, 5th edition, 6th edition, they would not even say that anything new was happening until a week before it was going to be, I think, for sale in stores, or was it in a week before pre-order? Like they wouldn't announce stuff ahead of time at all. They would be completely radio silent, and everybody would know a new Necron book was coming because leaks had come out. There were pictures taken at the printing facility or like a warehouse or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And they would just nothing. And then finally they'd be like, good news, new Necron book coming next week. And we're all like, yeah, we know. Thanks. And I don't, they at least now tell us stuff ahead of time, but they still are very close to the chest or vest or however you want to say it on a lot of different things. So yeah. Well, folks, it's after 11. I've been yammering on, and there's a lot of comments, and that's awesome, and I am way behind. Hey, Malev. How you doing? Just saw you there. Yeah, so if you folks, I appreciate it. I'm going to go back and look through some of these comments later on. That'll be cool. They'll be in the thing, so if you want to watch later on, you could be further ahead than I am, for sure. But yeah, so tomorrow I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to stream on Twitch. My Twitch computer has been screwy. I didn't stream on Twitch on Friday. It's either power supply or motherboard at this point, and I'm thinking about, I have an older laptop that might just at least be able to do OBS, and we will see how that works out. But that is a plan for tomorrow. Normally I start streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/tabletopminions at 7 p.m. Central Time. So anyway, otherwise, we'll see you folks again soon. Again, tomorrow morning is new Snarlcast. And that's about it. That's all I got. So have yourselves a good rest of your day. And I hope that you enjoy your weekend if you've got that. Some of you are already on Monday because it's, overseas and it's way over, up there. So have a good week as well. And do some hobby if you can. And stay safe. And thanks for watching.